Good evening. It's May 8th. It's about 5:17. We're just a few minutes late starting with our budget hearings, but I want to go ahead and get us started. Just a real quick glance around the room. Well, I'll do that in a moment. I think before I start, I neglected to mention before the meeting started, today is the vice chair of the Budget Committee's birthday. So he's, there you go. So the good news is he's catching up with me. So if I can find a way to slow down some. So I do want to welcome everyone to the first day of the FY26 budget hearings. I got a message from some of our staff I think it was Monday morning. Like I was just getting up, and I got a message saying it's budget week. So some of us are a little bit more excited. It might have been. So I'm Kevin Kramer. I'm chair of the Budget Committee. The mayor's proposed a $1.2 billion operating and capital budget for the next 7 weeks. This committee will be hearing from 20 of the 43 department agencies being considered for funding. Analyzing the annual budget is the most important job of this committee, and I want to thank all of you for the hours that you're going to be putting in over the next several weeks. With me today is the Budget Committee Vice Chair, Marcus Winkler. Other members of the committee with us are Shamika Parrish-Wright. She was joining us virtually. Okay, she's still with us. J.P. Leninger, Paula McCraney. It says Councilman Reno Weber. I don't see him in the room, so he will have an excused absence. Councilman Andrew Owen is with us. Councilwoman Marilyn Parker. Councilman Piagentini is in the room, was in the room, will be stepping back in. Councilman Jeff Hudson. Councilwoman Jenny Woolridge is with us. Other council members present include Councilwoman Hawkins, Councilwoman Chappell, Councilwoman Bass, Councilwoman McCraney, Councilman Batson, Councilman Benson, Councilman Joseph, Councilman Sam, Councilwoman Purvis. I think that captures everybody. You said they're on the screen behind me. Is Ms. Wright the only one on the screen? Okay, great. That captures everybody. Welcome again. If I could ask the clerk to please read our meeting announcement into the record.
This meeting is being held pursuant to KRS 61.826 and Council Rule 5A, read in full.
Great, thank you. Welcome Angela Dunn, Metro's CEO, and Aaron Jackson, Metro's Executive Director for Budget. Thank you, your staff, and all the department directors for all the energy poured into producing the $1.2 billion budget that's in front of us today. We are anxious to hear your overview of the proposed budget. Committee members, the presentation is divided into 4 parts: revenue, expenditures, debt, and capital. Enter into the queue when you have a question, and I will call on you at the end of each of these 4 sections. So we'll get one section at a time, and then after those 4 sections, we'll take a brief break for Metro TV to prepare for the second part of the hearings, where the Office of Management and Budget with Ms. Dunn, with the Office of Management and Budget. So, Ms. Dunn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, Angela Dunn. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Louisville Metro Government. Here to present the proposed budget overview. As Chairman Kramer mentioned, we'll be talking about revenue, operating, debt management, and capital. I'd like to first start with a thank you to the Office of Management and Budget Directors, Aaron Jackson, Richard Champion, Amanda Baker, Joel Novell, Christina Britz, and Ken Hillebrand. I would also like to thank Mayor Greenberg and his team, the deputy mayors, the Metro agency directors, and their leadership teams, OMB's budget team, and OMB's fiscal coordinators for all the work that they contributed to completing this budget. We will work over the next several weeks to provide accurate, timely responses to all members of the Budget Committee. In particular, we'd like to note that the Council has already received the following items per its request: the net interest fees and expenses detail, a detail of the capital fund, restricted accounts for all funds for FY25 and FY26, the Metro-wide position control report, department turnover report, and the Metro-wide contract list. The third quarter reports will be submitted within the next few business days. The FY26 recommended executive budget and detailed budget documents are available online for your reference. As the mayor stated in his budget address, this budget focuses on continued efforts to build a safer, stronger, healthier city, provide basic government services, expand economic development and downtown revitalization, increase affordable housing, and strengthen early childhood education. We accomplish these things through strategic investments in public safety, parks, and libraries. We leverage federal and state funding opportunities to spur our economic growth. We address homelessness, meet affordable housing needs, and invest in early childhood education. And last, but certainly not least, we recognize the need to attract and retain a talented workforce necessary to perform this important work and serve the citizens of our city. This budget promotes and supports an organizational culture that advances our priorities daily, demonstrates positive progress in all activities, and encourages high-quality performance to build a strong foundation for our future. This is a highly summarized snapshot of some of our large special revenue funding sources, just sort of a quick update on where we stand with these. $388.3 million of American Rescue Plan, also known as ARP, state and local fiscal recovery funds have been appropriated. As of March 31st, 2025, $318.7 million have been spent, and the remaining $69.6 million have been obligated per U.S. Treasury guidelines. $87 million in BIL federal awards have been secured and appropriated, utilizing $21 million of previously appropriated BIL match dollars. An additional $18.4 million BIL federal awards have been applied for or identified, potentially committing the remaining $6 million of BIL match. $132 million appropriated directly to Louisville Metro from the FY 25-26 Kentucky State budget includes $100 million for downtown revitalization projects, $7 million for the Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center, $2.5 million for Jefferson Memorial Forest, and $2 million for the Fern Creek Library. This was also mentioned last year, and I just mention it again this year because this was a biannual budget and applies to FY 26 as well. $19.5 million of opioid settlement funds, that includes the interest, has been received as of April 30th, 2025. There's approximately $15.6 million appropriated to date. This budget includes $3.1 million of proposed opioid settlement uses. Finally, Metro has received $1.8 million as a result of settlement agreements with Juul and Altria, resolving lawsuits claiming the company aggressively marketed its e-cigarettes to young people and fueled a vaping crisis. Settlement funds are required to be used for compensatory restitution or remediation to address the epidemic of youth vaping and nicotine addiction. So I hope you like graphs and charts because we're about to look at a bunch of them. Metro government maintains a financial stabilization policy for the unrestricted general fund balance, or what we refer to sometimes as the rainy day fund. The objective of the policy is to build a financial reserve which serves to provide a first defense against deficit spending and help maintain liquidity when budgeted overages become inevitable. It is essential that Metro maintains adequate levels of fund balance to mitigate current and future risk. Maintaining a financial stabilization fund with guidelines in this policy helps Metro to analyze its financial stability, accumulate financial reserves, maintain a favorable credit rating and a stable credit outlook, proactive strategy against service reductions or tax increases, and safeguards funds against temporary revenue shortfalls or unforeseen expenditures. Maintaining a financial stabilization fund is a prudent fiscal management tool, beneficial for sustaining the efficient operation of Metro despite the uncertainty of future economic climates. In using the Financial Stabilization Fund, Louisville aims to maintain a fund balance between 1 and 2 months of the average current year general fund budgeted expenditures, and also attain a fund balance goal of 13% of general fund revenues. This budget estimates the unassigned fund balance will reach 12.5% of the general fund revenue. This slide provides an overview of our urban services district, the revenue and expense summary associated with that area. The analysis provides a comparison of actual FY23 and FY24 urban services revenues and expenditures. It also includes the current FY25 budgeted revenues and expenditures and the estimates for FY26. Capital expenditures were added to this analysis for FY26 as a result of language change in KRS 67C 147. The capital expenditures identified for FY26 represent an estimated debt service payment applicable to bond-funded projects specific to USD services. Also new for FY26 is the exemption of applicable central business district expenditures from the total USD expenditures calculation in accordance with Senate Bill 129, approved by the state legislature during the 2025 regular session. Go straight into the revenue overview and then pause for revenue questions.
Yeah, if we can just pause for revenue questions, if that's okay. Councilman Winkler?
I'm sorry, my questions were specific to revenue operations, so.
Okay. Then we'll plow ahead. Oh, yours is specific to this. Okay, Councilman Piacentini. No, that's fine.
I do have one about this.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just about the urban service district thing. First of all, that's great. I mean, people have called me crazy when I said the USD was operating at a deficit the past couple of years, and I think it validates that. But I'm very happy to see that level out. If I'm reading this correctly, basically we're on fiscal sustainable terms this year.
Correct.
In the USD. My only question related, and maybe it's an expense question, but it's related to this chart, that's why I'm asking it now, is the mayor announced a $6 million capital allocation for a new fire department for Louisville Fire, which is in the USD. Is that captured in here?
In the capital line item that you see here is an estimated debt service payment. So
Got it.
that fire, that capital expenditure for Louisville Fire will be paid for if this budget, passes, would be paid for with bond funds. We wouldn't issue a separate bond issuance just for that. So we calculate what the related debt service would be for that particular item and then reference it here, apply it here in the USD
No,
chart.
thank you, because I actually had people ask about it, saying, how is that being paid for? And you've answered the question. It's being paid for out of USD. So thank you very much. I appreciate the clarity. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Great. For this particular piece of the budget, or Councilman Parker?
Funds.
Okay, go ahead. You have the floor. You have the floor.
I was curious as to where the opioid funds, where they come from and what they're being spent on.
Well, the opioid funds come from various settlements that were related to opioid abuse. So I don't know off the top of my head, but we have a long list of drug companies essentially that were involved in that lawsuit. And so that's where that settlement comes from. The opioid funds are to be spent on specific programs, remediation efforts, et cetera. But those funds are not spent on anything until an ordinance is brought before this body and it has to be approved. So anything that's been spent to this point has been brought to the Metro Council and approved by the various ordinances. Typically, the Health Department has brought most of those ordinances, but there have been some instances. Last year's budget was an example, and this year's budget is also an example where we have allocated the use of some opioid funds towards the allowable types of activities, but we're bringing it in the budget ordinance as opposed to a separate ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Piacentini, I think you had a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there, would you mind offline if you have the ability to sort of project out, again, we usually do like best case scenario, worst case scenario, middle range scenario for revenues moving forward. Is that something you guys have done or could do for the next maybe 2 or 3 fiscal years? Not right this second, but.
Sure, we can certainly take a look at that. We have not projected out past this, maybe 27. I think we have some preliminary projections for FY27, but we haven't really gone out past that. So we could certainly take a look and share with what we have at this point.
Thank you. And then was the non-recurring funding of the current revenue surplus taken into consideration when estimating fiscal year 26 revenue, or will we expect to see a large revenue surplus again next year?
Do you want to answer that?
Sure.
Aaron Jackson with OMB. The non-recurring sources that's built into the budget for this year, that is primarily revenue above what we budgeted for this year. So that's roughly 40, I think it was like 42 or 43 million that we're budgeting for in FY26. But that doesn't make any assumption for future budgets.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Winkler.
And we get the clerk and sheriff surplus, non-recurring, recurring revenue, right? When their term expires, is it at December 31st, or what sort of next year, what's sort of the date that we should expect that?
I believe last year, because we've got another 4 years before we get that again, and we got some payments maybe last year and the year before. They kind of came at different times. It really depends on when they provide that to us. So I think one of them did come late in the year. It came like in December, but that was maybe the clerk.
I can't remember which one it was.
But, and the other one we got a little earlier in the year. So there's no real timeline on when they provide that to us. It sort of depends on when they wrap up their audit and they wrap up their year and they have finalized their financials.
Okay, and you don't have any insights in this budget into what that surplus could potentially be?
Not
Okay,
at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, we'll go on and move on to the next piece. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll proceed with sort of the general revenue overview. The FY26 general fund revenues are projected to total $876 million, or 2.1% over the FY25 estimate. In FY26, the net interest fees and expenses associated with the revenue commission's operating cost and general obligation debt service payments is increasing by $6.1 million, and the FY26 investment income forecast is increasing by $9 million. Excluding these changes totaling approximately $15.1 million, the FY26 general fund receipts are projected to grow by 3.6%. The largest component, employee withholdings on individual earnings, are forecast to grow by 3.49% in FY26 as job and wage growth continues both nationally and locally. This is a breakdown of the various sources of revenue to Metro. As you can see, Metro has a high dependency on the occupational license tax at about 56% of our total revenue. The OL tax is comprised of net profits, wage withholding, and the insurance premium tax. The second highest source of revenue is the property tax at 24%. The real property taxes for both Metro and the Urban Services District are both anticipated to change slightly based upon the preliminary assessment recaps received from the Property Valuation Administrator. The preliminary recaps show total assessment growth in excess of 4% in both the metro area and the USD from January 1st, 2024 and January 1st, 2025. As of January 1st, 2025, real property in MLS areas 5 and 6 were reassessed. The FY26 real property tax rates will not be set until after the final assessment recaps are received from the Revenue Cabinet later this summer. Employee withholdings are expected to grow by 3.9% in FY26 as both job growth and wage increases slow somewhat as the Federal Reserve continues the higher interest rate environment in an attempt to combat inflation. By way of comparison, employee withholdings are projected to grow by 4.3% in FY26. Net profit collections are expected to increase in FY26 by 1.8%. FY26 net profit collections are forecast to increase slightly from FY25 as corporations face pricing challenges arising from potential widespread federal tariff increases. The water company dividend is expected to grow by 25.1% in FY25 and 11.2% in FY26 as the water company balance sheet is positively impacted by significant improvements in the statewide pension system. This chart is really just to help visualize the volatility of the net profits collection. So you can see there's not a slight increase or a slight decrease. It's sort of all over the board. We're up and down, and it sort of just, gives you a visual to understand why we have to take that volatility into account when we are working on our forecast as it relates to occupational license tax. FY22 saw record collections of $115 million, aided by an extraordinary one-time capital gain payment of $14.2 million. After slowing somewhat in FY23 to $91.3 million and $92.4 million in FY24, collections in 25 are forecasted to increase to $101.7 million, followed by $1.3 million in FY26. It should be noted how much higher the last 4 fiscal year net profits collections are compared to the slower, steady upward trajectory witnessed prior to the pandemic. Oops, here we go. This slide provides a depiction of the major revenue sources for FY '26 spread over 4 quarters. We don't typically budget this way, but this is just to sort of help visualize how that revenue could be spread over the 4 quarters of the year. As the council is aware, real and personal property taxes are due by 12/31 of each year, which leads to large swings in the amount of revenue recorded in each quarter. But overall, approximately 95% of the real and personal property tax line item is received during quarters 2 and 3. That's it for revenue.
Councilman Winkler.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions on the revenue side, so I'll just kind of rapid fire these off. Am I correct in reading the budget that the total estimated receipts for swimming this year are $1,300?
For swimming?
Yes, swimming pool fees.
Oh, okay. Do you?
We'll have to reach.
Okay, if you can take a look at that, would be very helpful to know. I just want to make sure I've read that correctly. Number 2, interest expense this year, you're projecting, I think it's 7.7 million versus 16.7, so roughly half. Can you speak to why the significant reduction in interest income? Or projected interest income, I guess I should say.
Sure. Well, we've increased from what we budgeted last year. We are, I guess, sort of taking a conservative approach to what we want to budget for investment income this year. We do recognize that we've done very well with investment income. There's a little bit of uncertainty in the market in terms of what those rates will do, and we are spending down more quickly. I think we're left at like 69 million of what we have left in ARP. So we are spending down on projects faster. The cash is decreasing a little bit, and so we took. We wanted to increase that estimate, obviously, but we were mindful of some of the unknowns associated with that.
Would it be possible to get some sort of chart that shows us, like maybe just for the last year and the future year, sort of how much money is in the bank with that spend rate of what you're drawing the interest on?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the last question I have, our percentage, I think it's a slide or 2 back, our percentage of fees is like 0.1% of the budget. Can you speak to how our collection of fees relates to similar-sized cities? Do we charge appropriate amounts? Do we collect appropriate amounts in things like building permits and those kinds of fees? Or are we heavy or are we light?
We have not conducted a comparison like that. It's certainly something we can take a look at. Fines and fees are collected sort of across the board in different ways. And so you have some things that happen out at the agencies, especially with permits. People come into the location in order to get a permit. They have to pay that fee, building permits, et cetera. Other permits are issued, sort of out in the field. And so we don't have that comparison, unfortunately. But I think we're pretty consistent year over year in what those revenues contribute to the overall budget.
Councilman Piagentini.
Thank you. Regarding property tax rates, so I see that in the slide where you broke down property taxes, it's up 4.3%, right? We try to keep it, try to get the maximum 4%, and then you have to mess with the rate to keep it around 4%. I'm quite happy that we could say to the public, our metro rate is lower than it's frankly ever been, right? The actual rate. Valuation's different, but I know you said that you don't have the full PVA assessments yet. Are you still waiting I know we don't vote on the rates for another couple months.
Right.
Do you have a projection of those rates, or truly you have no idea at this point if we'll have to pull the rates up to get to the 4%?
Well, this sort of reflects our projections, but we don't have final numbers. We won't get those till later this summer.
So in other words, based on your projection, the rate would be flat to slightly down for the
Correct.
0.3%. But if this is off by more than 0.3% negative, the rates might have to go up to hit the 4%.
Correct. We may have to have an adjustment.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Councilman Winkler.
Sorry, one more question on revenues. Can you speak to so I know, and I'm sure in the expense side, we'll talk a little bit about the EMS payments to suburban fire. What I'm interested in is what is our collection rate on EMS billing? How has that sort of trended over time? And again, I'll ask a similar question to the fees. How does that compare to similar-sized cities?
I know that our medical billing, so we collect both for EMS and health billing, and I'm not sure if it's broken out specifically, but I can say that that group, the majority of it is EMS. For that group, we bring in about 15 million a year. I think that's been fairly steady. We've seen some slight increases, so we've looked at this on multiple occasions, you know, and a lot of the challenge that we meet is lack of information from patients or just the negotiated rates that we can collect from either insurance companies or Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera. So, you know, we sort of work within the confines of what we can collect. And, you know, we send out letters, we make calls, we reach out. So, you know, we have a whole team that works on that. I don't have any information in front of me, and I can see if we can get that for you, but I don't have it in front of me in terms of how that compares to other cities.
Thank you. I have just a couple questions. What determines the fee structure for license fees and fees for usage? Are we looking at what it costs the city of Louisville to put those programs in place that the license fee is for, or do we see fees as an income generator?
I mean, most of that information comes to us from the agency that is administering those fees and
So
fines.
the agencies are saying, this is what it costs us, and this is what we need to generate. This is
correct.
what the fee should cover.
And a lot of them are set by, there may be some ordinance or something
Sure.
along those lines that sort of sets that rate or caps that rate as well. So, and it varies.
Good. So, but to your knowledge, there's not been a conversation to use these fees as an income generator. I know that has been a conversation with past administrations. I just wanted to be sure we kind of have a sense of where the current administration is,
No, I think the current administration has encouraged departments to take a look at their fee schedule.
to see if it covers the cost, but not as income generators.
I don't know if you could ever charge fees enough to completely cover the cost. It would just depend on what activity you're talking about. But department directors certainly have been encouraged to take a look at their fee structures to see if there is room to at least increase those fees where applicable and, you know, where it might be appropriate. So that's not a passive, we're just going to leave the fees alone. We're looking at every
Precisely.
opportunity that may be out
Get,
there.
but there's a difference in what we're talking about here, right? And there's a different philosophy. We have had administrations in the past who suggested or proposed that we go in and look at the fees for everything we do, license fees, fees for service, all of it, and compare what we charge in fees to what other cities our size are charging, and then raise the fees to whatever we can possibly get as a way of generating revenue. There's been pushback against that to suggest that the fees should cover the cost of the service that the fee is providing. So if you're getting a license fee because you added an addition to a house, then whatever it costs us to have an inspector go out and make sure that it's all done properly, all the paperwork we have to do, it's appropriate that the person getting that license fee would pay that expense. The question was, are we going to try to use that to generate revenue? In the past, we have not. I'm just curious if there's a shift here.
I don't know that I would say there is an organized effort being led by OMB. I mean, we are working
Okay.
with each department to review their revenues, review their expenditures, and see where we can pay for activities as much as we can out of the revenue that they generate.
Okay, good, thank you. And then the second question, a bit more specific to the set of circumstances we've been dealing with over the last number of years. There's been a lot of money that came into our budget through the Fed, and you know, we made adjustments accordingly. As we're looking at it, FY27 and future years, once those extraordinary funding sources go away, which most assuredly, and I'm only talking about the ones that were going to go away because of, you know, what was added. I haven't even started to think about yet what the current administration's decisions, how that may impact us. So that's another question. But
Right.
just the big numbers that we had in the past, when we look at future growth and what we're looking at, how do we see that balancing out? Are we,
Well,
How
I
are we
think
gonna
if you
adjust
want
to
to
that?
use ARP as an example, you know, that's one source of funding that we know is going to come to an end.
I think that's the biggest one.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, a lot of the ARP dollars was used towards one-time projects. There was an amount that was put towards, operational programs. And we still have a year, at that, for those type things, as those programs start to wind down. There is, technically that funding ends. So if those are programs that is determined need to continue, there has to be some discussion about how you're going to pay for them. But by and large, the ARP dollars, they were put towards one-time uses, which I think was very smart to utilize the money in that way. But there are some programmatic activities that we'll have to take a look at and determine if they're moving forward, how we pay for that.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else in the queue, we'll move on to the next section. Councilwoman Parker. Still on revenue?
What was about bonds, unspent
We're
bond? money?
coming
Is
up
that
on bonds.
appropriate
We're
now?
coming up on that if we can.
Okay, well, I can wait then.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so moving on with expenditures, this slide just breaks down our expenditures by category as a percentage of total funds. So you'll see that public safety, which includes departments such as LMPD, fire, EMS, and Metro Safe and Corrections, accounts for almost half of the general fund at about 48%, followed by central services, community building, and then public services. This slide provides an overview of Metro personnel for the last 9 years. A sharp decline is noticeable in years 20 through 22, which seems to have at least some relationship to COVID-19. During this time, there were also increased retirements and changes in the job market that made it more difficult for Metro to attract and retain employees. Personnel levels began to rebound in 2023 and has shown positive growth since then. This is just another look at our filled position count. So it shows significant improvement in filled positions over the last 3 years. And these are all as of April 1st. So you're looking at from April 1st, 2023, 5,500 to almost 5,700, 5,752. It's also important to note that this personnel count is all funds. And so this does include positions that are funded by federal and state funding sources. This is our CERS rate history, all the way back to the beginning of time. As you may recall, the pension contribution rate requirements at one time were to be increased by 12% for 5 years. While that was suspended in 21 due to the pandemic, FY22 and FY23 returned to that 12% or similar increase for both hazardous and non-hazardous. Rates started to decrease in FY24, and then FY25 results in an 11.6 decrease for hazardous and a 15.6% decrease for non-hazardous. FY26 will also see a decrease, although that is starting to slow a little bit at 7.5% and 5.5% respectively. This shows our total pension contributions for all funds. Of note, the contribution increase from 22 to 23 was due in part to the pension rate increases for that year. The contribution has been decreasing since FY24, and that's due to the reduction in those pension rates. And then this is just another view of the pension costs as a percentage of general fund revenues. And this does include some FY27 assumptions on this one. Our health insurance cost rates for FY26 are remaining the same for employees. Both FY25 and FY26 are displayed at budget with a forecasted increase of 4% for FY27. And then this just sort of breaks out how our road funding or our MAP, Municipal Aid Program, has historically been appropriated. In this budget, the FY26 recommended is consistent with recent years, in which the full amount of MAP funding is directed towards capital projects, specifically Metro street paving. Okay.
Questions? Councilwoman Parker? Or do you want to, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilman Winkler. Councilman Winkler, you have the floor.
All right, two questions on the expense side. One relates to our insurance pool. So, I know our sort of general insurance is through, and I'll screw up the acronym, but I think it's LAGIT, right? LAGIT and Leggett, or,
Legit and lag it.
thank you. But I noticed we have an expense line for $5 million for auto liability insurance. Does LAGIT only cover sort of general, can you just speak to how auto liability, the $5 million for auto liability relates to our self-insurance pool?
So we are self-insured for things like, the risk fund is associated with Legit and Laggett. So they are insurance pool, but we also are self-funded through the risk fund. For automobile, that is, so Legit stands for Louisville Area Governmental Insurance Trust, and it's general liability, basically, is what the two trusts. There's property and general liability. And so I can get that breakdown for you, but I believe vehicles is a different, it's funded through the risk fund, and that's why we have an appropriation going there.
And is, just for my own clarification, is that liability insurance we purchased through the private market, or we put $5 million aside into the risk fund that and we're self-insuring with that $5 million?
We are self-insuring, although we do have some policies that we purchase through the market just as supplemental coverage.
Perfect, thank you. The other question I had relates to the overtime line expense, and if you want to tell me to punt this question to HR in a couple hearings, I'm happy to, if it's better directed at them. But I believe our overtime expense this year, our scheduled overtime is budgeted to go up $5 million. There's been a strategy by the administration, and I think rightfully so, over the last couple of years to significantly increase both union and non-union funding, pay, in the hopes of filling open positions. However, our scheduled overtime continues to go up. I know there is a level of overtime that is appropriate, right, where you have the right balance between staffing and overtime. But can you speak at all, or again, if you want to punt this to HR is fine too, why do we continue to see the scheduled overtime number keep up, and at what salary level should we expect that to be in balance?
Well, I do think overtime, is obviously a challenge for our public safety departments who are still working through challenges of filling all of their open positions. And so, we do see this sort of, you would hope to see a correlation that as positions are filled, overtime goes down. But I think there are various operational challenges that play into that. So it's not just a one-for-one relation, although it seems like it would be. HR might be able to answer some of those questions, but I really think maybe some of the departments that are experiencing those overtime challenges could probably speak better to some of the operational issues that they encounter and why that plays into the overtime. We do, it is something we talk with them about every year when we're building the budget. It is something we're very aware of. We do increase the budget because oftentimes, we blow past it. And so we are trying to align the budget with what's actually been spent, in the year before when we're doing our forecast. I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Again, like I said, it may not be a fair question for you all, right? It's probably a better question for HR. I would like to sort of determine, again, it feels like we're still a little bit out of balance. Recognize some level of overtime is necessary and is actually desirable, right? Because there's a fully burdened cost of the employee where overtime is more economical. Feels like we're still quite a bit out of balance. And my question ultimately is, at what salary level, and I understand it's also more than salary, right? There's a macroeconomic labor market factor to play with, but when do we expect those to even out? And I can punt that question to HR.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilman Piagentini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we back up to the slide on full-time personnel, the bar chart going left to right?
This one or this one?
That one. Thank you very much. So I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, the 2018, 2019 drop had nothing to do with COVID-19. It had everything to do with Mayor Fisher's desire to increase taxes. We voted against the taxes as a council, and as a result, there was a quote $25 million budget deficit. I think it ended up coming in at 15 million. And the only way, I'm coming to why this is incredibly relevant today, the only way to control spending for the city, and just so everybody's aware, if you take that year, 2019, and back up, you can go back a decade, and we were running a structural deficit. Almost every year, it was much smaller than 25 million, but every year, we had expenses outpacing revenues by a couple million a year. So we were always, every year, trying to trim this, trim that, figure out how to make things work. We cut that many positions, a lot of it through attrition, a lot of it wasn't like we just laid off hundreds of people, but we just said, we're not gonna refill positions and we're gonna reduce headcount. And since then, every single year, we have run surpluses in this city, right? And I will tell you that fiscal discipline, that was a very tough budget year. Everybody that was here, I don't think wants to necessarily relive it, but it was the greatest thing, and I will go down, I don't care how long I'm on this council, it may be the greatest move, the greatest year, the greatest votes that I'd ever taken, because it put us on the track we're on. Reason I'm bringing this up is I am getting a little nervous about both the numbers that I'm looking at this chart and even some of the language that we're using about these positions. Because labor is, hands down by far, nothing comes close, the biggest expenditure in the city, right? So every single one of those, and we've also, it's compounding because it's both an increase in personnel and we're proposing a 5% increase in at least non-labor raises, which again, I want competitive rates for everybody to get paid as much as they should get paid as a competitive rate to get great people to work here, and so that they can be successful and live off of that wage. And we had to make big moves in our union contracts, which again, had to happen. I voted for every single one. We had to pay our police more, EMS, librarians, everybody needed to get pay increases. So I'm bringing this up to ask, and I've asked this in prior years. Now, I think, and you could correct me if it was last year or the year before, but I asked for sort of a fiscal estimate on projecting out 1 or 2 years on what it would look like. The projection, and I came up with this last year or the year before, was that we would be at a $50 to $80 million deficit moving forward. But now we're running surpluses. I'm bringing this all back to say, where is the mayor's, number one, and I asked this question last year, is there anything in this, we've talked about revenue now, we've talked about expense now, is there anything in any projection that you can see, and I'll call it the near future, 2 years, 3 years out, I wouldn't ask for anything further, that barring unforeseen circumstances, the mayor or OMB and yourself are thinking about increasing taxes?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Is this, again, I'd probably ask for it again, frankly. Would you guys be okay? I know I asked earlier about sort of revenue projections, doing something similar with expenses and giving us a best case, worst case, middle case scenario on expense increases, right, considering some of these new labor costs versus revenue increases, and then giving us a projection on, again, all things being equal, what that would look like in the next 2 years? Can we do that again?
Sure, we can work on that.
Yeah. Because again, I think that's helpful related to multi-year fiscal sustainability. I mean, in your estimation, given, I mean, again, we're talking about another, I don't know, 60 or 80 personnel added in this budget. We're seeing the increases now sort of year over year. Are you convinced that this budget, again, without weird circumstances that we can't predict, but if this was a continuation budget next year, that we would be in a fiscally sustainable position? Would we have revenues outpacing expenses?
Am I convinced?
Yes.
I would say that I feel comfortable that we are in a strong position. Obviously, we have to take into account the things that we don't know, and we talked a little bit, we didn't spend a lot of time on the slide, but the OL tax is somewhat volatile. It's tied to the economy. Sure. And so we're very much have to be aware of that. I'm comfortable that we are in a strong position to continue the momentum that we have. I think we're going to have to continue to watch expenditures. I think we're going to have to continue to look for opportunities to capitalize on our revenue as much as we can. So continuing a strong investment policy, not raising taxes, but continuing our effort to collect the taxes as they stand. The Revenue Commission does a fantastic job of collecting that occupational license tax for us. I think they're on track to bring in close to $13 million in delinquent taxes alone. And so that system that we invested in a few years ago has been a game changer in terms of what we can collect from that perspective. So I think it's continuing to look at our operational efficiencies, whether on the expenditure side or the revenue side, to sort of continue to narrow that gap on the structural imbalance and move us in that direction.
Because, look, this is this mayor's third budget. I've been very generally macro level happy with the revenue to expense ratio. I mean, this is good, right? I just want to make sure, even though we budget one, for 12-month periods, every council should be cognizant of multi-year periods of time. Because the decisions we're making today won't just affect us for these 12 months. They will affect us for many, many years to come. So I would like to redo that projection again. And I know you put assumptions in there. Feel free to assume, right? Just dictate or just spell out what those assumptions are, if you don't mind. I'd like to take a look at that and just to make sure we're thinking in that way every budget year. So I appreciate your commentary, though. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Lininger?
Yeah, sort of piggybacking on Councilman Piagentini's question, in terms of the growth in positions filled, do any departments outstrip others, or do we have a department or any that stick out in terms of we're filling more positions since the dip?
I don't have any real insight into that. I think HR can probably answer that question a little bit better in terms of, they have a little more insight into the speed at which positions are being filled. There was a turnover report, which doesn't necessarily relate to how fast we're filling positions, but there was a turnover report that indicates our turnover is slowing overall. So I think that's a good indication that we are filling positions and maintaining positions. But I don't have necessarily a fill on what department is hiring faster than another.
And operationally, again, is there any department that we have more employees, that we have a greater operational expense in terms of payroll?
Well, LMPD, obviously, public
LMPD,
safety,
okay, thank you.
yeah.
Councilman Piagentini, direct response or direct?
Direct response, yeah. If you don't mind, Councilman Lininger, in the documents sent by Latanya and Beth, one of them under expenditures, page 5, there is a breakdown of new positions. There's a chart that breaks it by department. So the biggest one is emergency services. That's mostly related to the 911 call center. No, sorry, the biggest one is public works, related to cleanliness. 32 new positions, 13 emergency services, mostly around call center, the new drone program, paramedics, right around that program. Library 2, Zoo 1, Parks 15, Tech 4, Facilities Fleet 1, JCO 1. So, yeah, the new positions are broken down in the chart. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I understood
These
for
are
the,
these are questions for OMB. We're just clarifying.
yes,
Correct,
but
yes.
I'm just saying, I
Wanna
understood
get into
that about the upcoming fiscal year. I meant on the trends, piggybacking again on your question.
Great.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry for the clarification.
Councilman Winkler.
Thank you. And I just want to make two comments about, one, we talk about sort of the history going back here to 2020. I think it's worth noting that a large part of the reason why we are in a much better fiscal position today than we were 4 years ago are significant changes to our SERS contribution, right? I mean, 4 years ago, we were projecting that within 4 years, we'd have an incremental $65 million in retirement expense. And during the Bashir administration, instead of seeing 15% annual increases, we're seeing 11.9, 11.6, and 7.5% reductions in our SERS contribution. And so
Correct.
that has resulted in tens of millions of dollars of savings that I think is critically important. So I just wanted to make that point. And then secondarily, while I agree with my colleague that, we want to make sure that we have a forward-looking view, that we're careful, I also want to make sure that we understand, when we look at those views, our costs are very easy to project. our revenues are not that easy to project. And, as Councilman Piaggi pointed out, last year, 2 years ago, we sat here and projected a $60 to $80 million shortfall, and instead we have a $50 million surplus. I mean, that's a $110 to $130 million swing. So we also need to be careful about making too conservative decisions, because while it's great coming in this year with a $50 million surplus, it's also worth noting that there's an opportunity cost that money was not deployed in the city last year, where it could have been worked to build housing, to house homeless people, to do economic development, to get more police officers on the street, whatever it is. So while I'm glad we're running a surplus, we should also recognize that there's an opportunity cost because that money was not deployed because it wasn't allocated.
Sure.
There's a question in there? Okay, Councilman Piagentini, a question in there?
Yeah, clarification with all of my colleagues. Totally agree, there's an opportunity cost, but and I just want to compliment, and I try to call balls and strikes, the CSRS and pension program, absolutely. Governor Beshear was the governor, and both those budgets were completely written and passed by the Republican Senate and the Republican House and the General Assembly. So if we're calling balls and strikes, sure, Governor Beshear was there, but those budgets are written and ultimately passed by the General Assembly, as they have the power of the purse via the state constitution. So thanks very much to the Republican General Assembly for correcting the pension problem as well.
Thank you. And moving on. Then I wanted to follow up on some questions specifically about positions, and as Councilman Piagentini pointed out, page 5 does list the new positions, and there are 69 new positions on there. I was wondering what the total cost in this year's budget is going to be for those 69 positions. And the reason for that is I don't believe we're funding all 69 of them effective June 1st, right, or June 30th,
No,
right?
it's
So
October 1.
October 1. Okay, so what's the calculated cost in this year's budget? And then recognizing, of course, that we'll take the full expense in the following year. So October 1
We'll get
is
that
when.
calculation for you.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So, but October 1 is the date you're projecting?
Correct, yes.
Okay, good, thank you. And then just a follow-up to that. We're looking at new positions on page 5. We created several new positions in last year's budget based on what we projected was going to be happening. We know that some of the things that we projected in last year's budget did not come to fruition. And so I've been looking through. I don't see where there's a reduction in, and again, I think there were staff, I know for certain, there were positions that we approved that we expected to be hired. I know that things changed in the interim, and I know that some of those positions were not filled. I'm looking to see where those positions have been removed in this year's budget, and I can't find them. So, and again, these aren't layoffs. These are, positions we created, never filled them, and then realized that we don't, because of changes, they may not need to be filled. I can't find them, and I'm wondering if you can point me someplace.
I don't think go ahead, Aaron.
So we wouldn't necessarily remove or eliminate those positions that were funded and budgeted in FY '25, but may not have been filled. It could have been a variety of reasons why they were not filled, and maybe the department intends to fill them at some point. So they're still a part of their position control report and built into the budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, so we'll have to revisit. I mean, again, some of the departments, we know that the work that they were anticipating is not work they're going to do. We know that's true. So I guess we'll have to go into those departments and look and see how that department might be proposing using those personnel differently than what we had originally intended.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other follow-up questions? Seeing none, okay. We go ahead and move into the next section then.
Okay, debt management. This is Metro's debt service for FY '26-27. During FY '25, Metro government issued an $84.1 million in bonds based on the FY '24 capital budget. We will issue approximately $96 million for the FY '25 approved projects later this fall. And then obviously the things that are in FY '26, if they're bond funded, they would be funded the following year. In managing debt, it is Metro government's policy to achieve the lowest cost of capital, ensure the highest credit ratings possible, consistent with the current economic and demographic conditions of the community, assure access to the capital credit markets at all times, preserve financial flexibility as it relates to the timing of structure of debt, manage interest rate exposure. Bonds have not yet been issued for the FY25 capital budget needs, but we anticipate going to sale later this summer. This is our outstanding debt level. These two charts just place our debt in a historical context across two different measures. Total outstanding debt as a percentage of our general fund revenue. As of FY26, our outstanding debt is approximately 8% of our budgeted general fund revenue. And then the annual net debt service as a percentage of our general fund revenue is hovering around 78 to 80%. That's it on debt.
Marilyn, I believe we've moved into the section that you were looking for. Councilman Parker, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So it appears we've got 144.6 million in unspent bond money that goes back to 2009. So where is that money going, and could it be used for 2026 projects so that we don't have to borrow money for those projects?
Are you looking at the capital report, the capital expenditure report for those balances?
Maybe.
It's bad.
I'm looking at that.
So, when it comes to very old projects, there could be various reasons why the project hasn't closed out. We do a due diligence review of those capital projects. We work with the agencies to try to determine, are these projects still open? Do you still need this funding? Can they be closed? And where we can, we do. We close those out. And then if there's any funding left associated with that, it can be reallocated to a different project. In terms of where that money goes, anything that was bond funded, we draw that money down and it earns interest. So, and we also leverage. We sort of have this whole cash flow process that we follow where we're sort of leveraging money. If we've drawn down money on certain projects, we can utilize that cash to continue on with projects that are ongoing, even if a project maybe has stalled. And so there's a continual balancing or managing of our cash that includes bond funds or other various sources that we have. And if it's not being spent, it's being invested. Essentially what it boils down to. I don't know if does that answer your question?
Sort of. So basically, if you can't reallocate it, you're investing it.
If we have, that money,
That's-
if we've received it through whatever source we've received it from, it's in our bank and it's being invested in various, market securities.
Do we
and
ever
that
see
sort of thing.
that from time to time, like get a report? Because if we might have an upcoming project that comes before us, that a needy project, we could use that money for that. And I'm glad that you're investing it, and we're coming up with $50 million extra because of good investments. But some of those dollars along the way might be used for different needy projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, we come to you when we have additional revenues to be appropriated. We come to the council and we will ask for, typically you might see that in the year-end ordinance, for example. When we came before you, we said, well, we've ended the year in the surplus, and part of that surplus was interest income that we had, earned, and we come to this body with a recommendation of how that can be spent. So that's one way that those dollars, but most of the money, it's already committed to some sort of activity. It's budgeted for. If it's not being spent, it's being invested. If it's not being used today, it's probably going to be used tomorrow at some point in time when whatever activity it's been committed for moves along, or incurs the next expenditure. So, cash and how we manage cash, is sort of a little bit different than when you look at a budget and see line items, and certain activities that the money's going towards. You may not use it right away, but the money it's all appropriated through the action of this council.
Okay. I don't know, I guess if there's a clear way that we can see where the money's going so that we don't think that there's $144 million just out there in space somewhere.
Well, there's an investment council, we have quarterly meetings, and there's reports, so we can certainly share investment reports if requested.
Okay, we'll talk.
Yeah, I'm
more
sorry,
about
I don't think that, and I apologize for interjecting, I don't think that's what Councilman Parker's asking. I think what she's asking is, we've got 10 years of previous capital budgets that there's $144 million, and Councilman Parker, stop me if I'm wrong here, right? That we've allocated previously, 7 years ago, we allocated $5 million for the sidewalk project, right? There's still some balance remaining, $10,000, $100,000. Is there more work to be done on that sidewalk project, or can that be swept up so that this year you don't have to borrow 89 million, you only have to borrow 88 million, 800? I think that's your question, right? Less to do with the investment income,
Okay.
but more to do with unspent, and does that money still need to be done, or how can you easily determine that? I think that's,
Well, we go through our review, there's a lot of cleanup to be done, we recognize that, we work with the department. Again, it is a matter of, we sit and look at the numbers, and we have to work with the departments to understand whether or not they still need that funding for that particular project or not. And so we work through those projects. Oftentimes, we can close out a project, and then that money can go towards something else, and then that offsets our bond, and what we have to, so then we have to bond less, for example, if there is money that can be moved.
Councilman Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I always learn things as we go, and it was always obvious to me that, like with ARP funds that are sitting somewhere, we can invest those and have net interest income. What I hadn't thought about was that if we've, issued a bond and the money's sitting there, that the funds that hadn't been drawn down could be invested. And obviously, capital markets are fluctuating all the time. And so I guess what I'm thinking, my question is, what do the capital markets look like right now in terms of what you can get paid, what it costs to borrow money over and against what you can get in return? Are we in a position where you can get arbitrage on that, on those funds? And how are those markets changing and moving compared to how they've been over the last couple of years?
We do have to monitor for arbitrage. I mean, that is something that we have to be aware of, and we monitor for that. The rates, in some cases, we may do a little better in what we're earning than what we're spending, but it does sort of fluctuate. I don't have the investment reports in front of me right now, so, you could certainly take a look at that. But I do know that we work with Meter Investment. We have an investment firm that we work with. They help us monitor what we're investing in, whether or not we're getting, if we're in danger of hitting arbitrage or what that might look like. And so they're a great partner to help us manage our cash and, get the most effective rates that we can get one way or the other.
Right, I mean, if that spread is wider at sometimes, you would be wiser to draw down on that money and move projects along more quickly than in a different situation. So
Sure.
It was just something I was thinking about. Thank you.
Yep.
okay, I don't see anyone else in queue, so I think the next section is the OMB budget.
Did you want me to run through capital real quick?
I'm sorry, capital, sorry.
I just have a
Sorry.
couple of slides, just a few more pie charts for you to look at. So this is this chart identifies the various sources that have been used to fund our capital projects. Bonds and notes account for approximately 36%. Grants also serve as a large funding source at approximately 32%. The capital fund and other sources are the next largest at 28% combined. The other category is comprised of state, forfeiture, and previously authorized bond funds. This capital budget reflects a recommended level of capital debt approximately $8 million less than FY25 and is reflective of Metro's approach to maintain a consistent and even an improved level of debt when possible each year. So I want to talk a little bit about a multi-year capital plan. This is a new plan that we've been working on. We've begun building a multi-year plan that will allow us to strategically manage the capital requests each year. You may remember the one-pager plan that we presented last year. We've taken that plan and created the next iteration. This version includes 5 years of anticipated capital expenditure. The plan is not reflective of projects funded with grant sources. It also does not include every road or parks improvement, vehicle purchase, or deferred maintenance. Instead, you will see that we have identified those types of projects that historically receive funding as a cumulative total, including $15 million of MAP funding to support the $30 million per year in street paving. And I'll pull the report up here in a second. The second section of the report identifies anticipated construction and capital improvement projects. This list is not meant to be binding, as it's a living document that will evolve over time to meet the needs of Metro. It serves as a planning document for future years, but does not necessarily indicate commitments. And then let me see if I can.
Are we ready for questions?
There we go. So, and this is kind of a snapshot of that plan.
Ready for questions?
Yes.
Councilman Winkler.
Thank you. I've got two questions for you. One, and again, if you want to punt this to LMPD or Fleet and Facilities, that's fine. But I know there's another $9.2 million for the LMPD headquarter renovation in this budget. Do we have, and I believe we've allocated $6 million before, and I think another allocation, if I'm not mistaken. Do we have a total estimate for that building's renovation cost?
Well, this report shows, it's on line 40. So we have the 9.2 for this year. Estimates that we got from Fleet and Facility, or from Facilities, 17.5 projected for 27, and then 9.3 the next 2 years, for a total on this list of 45. But I think that with the other appropriations, I'd have to add that up for you, but I don't have that in front of me. I do know that the 17.5 next in 27 has something to do with the ballistics glass, something, and, you know, so that's sort of a higher expense. But otherwise, that's sort of spread, the remaining is spread out.
I don't recall, when we initially bought that building, what was the estimate for the total cost of the project?
Do you recall? I don't recall.
I'd be interested to look that up. I seem to remember it being sub 20 million is sort of what's in my mind, but I don't remember that exactly. But I'd be interested if we could figure that out and look back and maybe understand, you know, why is it a balloon? And I know the environment's changed, construction costs, but I mean, I think, you know, as we acquire buildings, and particularly for renovation, I think it's important to understand, you know, what are realistic costs and what are appropriate costs. My other question relates to the allocations for libraries, which I'm very happy to see. I just had, I was not totally clear why you've got 7.65, I think, for the LFPL capital campaign, and then a separate $2 million for Fern Creek. Can you talk about why those two are split out?
Sure. So in working with the library staff, we were asked to include this particular project in the budget to give them the authority to fundraise through the Library Foundation for that particular project. And then the Fern Creek, that's a state grant that we received, so we just need the budgetary authority to establish that project.
And then the last question I have relates to the proposed $3 million downtown transit hub. We own a number of properties downtown. In fact, we have RFPs on multiple properties. I'm curious whether any of those were considered or are being considered as potential options for the transit hub versus an incremental purchase of a facility.
I'm not aware of what properties have been reviewed or considered. I have not been involved in that process. And I do think it's more like a transfer hub rather than a transit hub. So I don't know if that makes a distinction, but I'm not sure what properties have been considered or not considered.
Do you think, would that be a question for Fleet and Facilities, or would that be a question for TARC?
It may be.
Or maybe Dana's, I see Dana pop up behind you, so maybe, sorry.
Ms. Maitland, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Dana Mayton, Deputy Mayor for Operations and Budget. As you all probably know, TARC got a grant whereby they hired a consultant to look at routes. You know, they've done this huge study, all that. So I think they've got some specs in mind for where a location should be generally, how much acreage they need. Ideally, it'd be an acre and a half, but if we could find something in the acre range. So I'm certainly would say we've not ruled out using a property that we already own, but if we could find one that you didn't have like demolition cost and those sorts of things that sort of meet those parameters. And I know Ozzie will elaborate on that, but I know he doesn't come till June, so we knew that you all would have questions about this beforehand. And Mark can probably answer some of those when he comes, I think, next week.
Thank you. Senior Wilson, okay. This question is not as specific as perhaps I would like for it to be, so probably even less for your sake. When we're looking at some of the expenditures, the recurring expenses that we're adding to this year's budget and looking out, 3 years, 27, 28, and 29, I know it's a bit much to ask for, a projected revenue for 2029. But I am curious what the thought pattern was, or what thought pattern is, as we're hiring these new positions. How do we hope to have that be sustainable into 28 and 29? So is there an overall sense that growth is going to take care of this, or how are you projecting that we'll cover these expenses?
You're talking about capital specifically?
Yes.
At this point, we're just trying to start building a planning strategy.
Okay.
So, a lot of it is, there's some assumptions, there's some estimates, but, we're trying to build this out to sort of help with that planning strategy in terms of identifying how you might pay. Obviously, traditionally in capital, we do, we use bond funding in some cases where appropriate. And so there's the different sources of funding we have to consider in terms of how we might pay for this. But what you see in front of you is really, there's a lot of assumptions in this, for the out years where we're just sort of trying to build out a plan.
Yeah, and I think that's my question, honestly, is I probably should have been more specific. As you look at those out years, is the plan, I guess, is the best word to use, that we would cover the cost going forward, or is there a plan to increase our borrowing? Beyond one of the reasons I've been so pleased with with last year's budget and with what's proposed this year is, while we're still bonding, 'cause if we're going to do capital projects, you almost have to, right? I have been impressed that this mayor's been more careful about increasing debt. And so I just was wondering, looking forward, and you're trying to figure out those projections, is there a shift in our thinking about borrowing, or do we have some other hope that we'll cover these costs?
I think the goal is to be able to at least maintain debt. I don't think there's any desire pending, some unforeseen, but today, as I
Right.
sit here, I don't think there's any desire to drastically increase what we bond.
Okay.
So, again, it's managing the sources that we have available to us,
Okay.
to bring these things to fruition.
Good. So the projections it's not intended in your projections. You haven't built in, we're going to increase debt. That's
No.
what I'm asking. Okay,
No.
good. Thank you. Just want to be sure. And then, are there any funds expected to be spent in FY '26 that are not contained in the mayor's proposed budget?
No? No, not to my knowledge.
So all of what we expect to be captured is built into here.
Correct.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
I
Seeing
have a
none.
question. I've been trying to
Oh,
get in the queue.
I'm
Mr.
sorry?
Chair.
Um,
I have a question. I was
Go
trying to
ahead.
get in the queue. I don't know if I got you. Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but I appreciate your presentation and as it's answering some of those as well as my colleagues' questions. So I know that you said that just because something is listed in this capital project doesn't mean that it's promised, but that, that can change and it's a living document. I want to bring up the fact for District 3, which is a highly, it's in a district that pays into the tax system, a lot of workforce, a lot of small businesses. It has a very active, highly used library, and we were promised that there would be a library expansion, and it was listed last year. I don't see it listed this year. I don't have everything in front of me, and I tried to zoom in on that last document that you had. But it was listed last year, and then there was also a separate promise from the mayor to help with the Shively splash pad, which we are in District 3 committing a portion of the monies we got back in the mid-year adjustment to that. So the match is 100,000. And so I don't see that as well. But my question is, where is this in the plan around the Shively Library expansion, thinking that as you all were talking about the other libraries and how you have to and then the transit system for TART, you have to purchase land. We have I have constituents, I have people in Shively and around in the District 3 who are asking, when will this library be expanded? And we will need to purchase land. Whatever happens, it's going to have to be in a different location, in a bigger place. So I just want to know where that is, and if you can't answer that, point me in the direction of who can answer that.
Well, I think, what I want to caution about this list is it's not an exhaustive list. It's just what we have today, and we're presenting that to you again. It's a living document that can evolve over time. I don't believe, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a specific line item for 26 for the Shively Library currently proposed. Doesn't mean that it can't be considered for future years, depending on, when those decisions are made or when that information is presented to us. So I don't want you to think that this list is any sort of indication of everything that might be future planning. It's sort of our starting point. We also did not, you might notice there's lines there, parks deferred maintenance and different things like that. We didn't go through and list out every single project. So I don't know. I can't speak to, I don't have it in front of me whether or not a splash pad is in there or not. That might be something that Parks has more information on. But we didn't list them out on this list is the point I want to make sure you guys understand, is that if we were to list every single, project and road, and you would have a very long list to review. And so this was meant to be more at a high level.
Understand. My main concern, if I may readdress, is that last year it was listed, and then how is that decision made to remove it? Because as we're talking about, as it was mentioned with the new police headquarters, it's listed every year. It's probably going to get the money it's going to get every year. So how is this decision making happening? And how can we, as council members, when we have capital projects that we're really invested in, how can we weigh in and help influence and do the parts that we can? Because my assumption was that this year, it was mentioned last year, and that this year, it was listed last year, this year there would be some other movement in that direction. And I know we just had a shakeup as the library director just retired, and we have an interim former deputy mayor coming in. I get that. But this is something that was on the capital budget last year. And how was that decision made to remove it? And how do I get it back on there as a real thing to be moving forward with?
I just want to clarify, I think, are you talking about, was it on the proposed long-term plan last year, not necessarily in the actual capital ordinance or on the list of capital projects approved for last year? It was on that blue sheet, the single sheet that was sort of proposed plans. There was some, evaluation, and we sort of built our starting point. And like I said, there were several things that were on that list that didn't necessarily get transferred over to this list. I think if there's something you want to add to that list, it's a conversation to have with the budget committee. It's a conversation to have with the mayor's office, that however the council would typically communicate those desires is probably the way you might want to communicate about where that project stands.
Okay, and I have done that. Thank you for trying to answer it, and I'll keep following up.
Councilman Winkler.
Yeah, sorry, and I have more a comment than a question, and I don't want to belabor this point, but I do think it's important for all of us to just sort of understand, and I was talking with somebody about this a minute ago. If I remember, and my memory's not perfect, and it was a previous administration, but when they came to us with purchasing the AT&T building, it was like a $6 million project. I don't think any of us realized at the time that the new headquarters, which I personally want to be the best headquarters for our police officers possible, I don't think any of us realized that it was a $75 to $80 million project, and we probably would have had some different discussions. And I just think that, as we're considering things, and I think that's important as we think about other acquisitions here, that we have a full, and again, you can't predict future construction costs, but, construction costs don't explain the difference between 6 million and 80 million, right? And I just think there's a very important lesson there that we just need to be mindful of when we're making these kind of decisions, and the potential that we're obligating future councils to inordinate sums of money unwittingly.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're ready to move on to the next section. And I believe that finishes us with this portion. Next is the OMB section. I think the clerk needs a minute to shift some things around. I don't know if you guys, for those of us who are paying attention or watching or following this online, the two folks who are sitting in front of us right now are the same two folks who will be sitting in front of us for the next portion. So they're not going, well, they may stand up and move for a bit, but they're coming right back. The clerk needs a few minutes. We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break, but try to be back, please. Okay. Metro TV, we're going to start in 30 seconds. All right. Welcome back to our last hearing of the day, the Office of Management and Budget. I'm Kevin Kramer, Chair of the Budget Committee. With me today is our Budget Vice Chair, Marcus Winkler, and other committee members present are Councilwoman Parker, Councilman Benson, Councilman Owen, Councilwoman Bast, Councilman Purvis, Councilwoman Rui has joined us, Councilman Sam is here. Coming back into chambers are Councilman Chappell and Councilman Leninger. And joining us virtually is Councilwoman Shamika Parrish-Wright. The clerk, do we need to read the same thing into the record, or is this an extension? Good. We'll proceed with the meeting then. If it's okay, Ms. Dunn, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. We didn't provide a presentation.
Nope. Oh, so you want us to just start bombing you with questions? All right. We got one for you. Councilman Winkler.
Thank you. I had a question about the contractual services for $33 million. I assume part of that is the YUM payment, is that right?
10.8 million.
What makes up the other, I have no detail on what the other 20 is and why it's 5 million or 6 million higher, 7 million higher than the year before.
Most of our contractual services have to do with, and I don't have the list in front of me, but they're system maintenance, the Workday system. We have contractual agreements in terms of maintaining the system, continued development of the system, and sometimes those costs, like anything else, go up year over year.
Could we get a breakout of the 33? And I mean, maybe just everything over like a couple hundred, right? I mean, if you've got contracts for $80, you probably don't need to list those, right? But
Right.
anything sort of substantial, just so that we can get a little more fidelity behind that 33 and also understanding why it's $7 million more. Does that tie into the IT things that were mentioned? Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to most of it. So on page 165 of the recommended detailed budget, it does list various line items specific to contractual services. Included in that is the roughly $10.8 million for the arena payment. It includes roughly $2.1 million for professional services, and that's to maintain our financial system. Bank service fees are also included in that. But the largest amount is the $6 million for the EMS runs, so that's included in that number as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'm looking at the funds for Evolve 502. This is an item that we had funded in the past. Was there a change in the funding? And if so, how much was given in FY26 and in FY25? And in FY26, how many students are anticipated to benefit from the scholarship support?
So I can speak to the financial question, but I don't have any information on the operational question. But
Okay.
The budget includes $600,000 to Evolve 502. $100,000 is for operating support, and then there's $500,000 for the scholarship support for Evolve 502.
Okay, great, thanks. And to the operational piece, I'll get that somewhere else.
Last year, I think it was just 100,000.
I was gonna say that, I should have asked that as a follow-up, yeah. So the difference between last year and this year was 100,000 last year, 600 this year, so it's a
That's
$500,000 difference.
$500,000, yes.
I do know that there is some conversation with Evolve 502 about expanding who it is that the scholarships would be offered to. In the past, it's been a limited pool, and they're trying to expand that pool. But as far as like who's actually received it, you don't have
Yeah, we don't have that
a sense
information.
of that. Okay. Then, and this may be operating as well, but still with Evolve 502. In FY22, they were given $3 million in miscellaneous special revenue. None of that's been spent. And then FY23, they were given $6 million for scholarships, and all of that's been spent. So can you speak to
So I'm going from memory, but I think you're referring to what was in the capital budget. And I believe there were some matching obligations at that particular time. And I think the matching funds just didn't get removed from the capital report that you're probably referencing.
Okay. So then they did spend our portion.
That's right.
Okay, good, thanks. There are, Councilwoman Chapel, I'll get back in. You're on. She's not in the queue.
All right. Just curious, do we know how many rides Louisville Metro employees take on TARC annually? Just curious, because when I get on, I feel like some do a little tally, and I was just wondering if we get that number, is $100,000 to TARC covering those rides, or?
The $100,000 proposed in this budget, yes, it's meant to, help offset those rides. We, for the last year, I don't have that information. We didn't, we didn't have any money in the budget for the last year. I did speak with TARC recently, and I believe they have a new system where they can track the ridership differently than what they have in the past. So I don't have a lot of information on that, but that was just a recent sort of quick conversation. So I believe that maybe there's a new technology available where they can track the ridership differently.
Sure, maybe I'll bring that up again when Ozzy comes. My other question, there's 6,000, there's revised budgets, and one of them is $6,000 for the Cloverleaf Neighborhood Association for new neighborhood signs. And I was just wondering, it kind of looked like a random item, especially because I felt like we had approved that with like NDF funding.
It
Your
probably
document,
likely
page
is
3.
NDF.
Yeah, that was $6,000 that was added by the council in the FY25 budget for that particular purpose.
That's not random, though? I mean, like, why that one NDF?
It was a part of the FY25 budget, so I'm not exactly sure, but that's where it was appropriated.
I'm not.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry. I just promoted. Ms. Bell.
Latanya Bell, Council Financial Analyst. In your budget process, the council members have the option to add funds to each department, and that was added during that process. So therefore, anything that got added in addition on top of what got originally submitted by the department is also documented in here as well.
Thank you. And then last question, for miscellaneous services, there's an anticipated increase in operating costs for Workday Learning Support. Workday, I understand, is the software that we're using, but is that 100% increase in cost for the product, or is that for support of the product? And if so, why is it under OMB?
Oh, okay. Christina Britz, Executive Director of Business Solutions within OMB. So some of the Workday support costs are in the OMB budget under Business Solutions. That team supports Workday from a functional standpoint. That learning, that additional $100,000 for support was offset by a different agreement that we had with them. This is what they call a Workday Success Plan. It gives training credits into their community platform, but it also gives us the ability to work directly with Workday experts without having to use our own consultants.
So that's not how much we pay for Workday, it's just for the support within Workday?
It's yes, it's an additional optional support, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the transfer of positions from OMB's Revenue Commission to the Metro Technology Services. What roles will the 3 transferred positions perform in Metro Technology?
They will perform similar roles to what they are performing now at the Revenue Commission. It's server support, it's that sort of technical piece of it. Revenue Commission has historically had those activities housed within the Revenue Commission, but with recent abilities to move to cloud-based server, where we can keep our servers on the cloud, which before we couldn't. We had to keep it in-house at the Revenue Commission. There's been some changes. We are transferring those 3 positions. I can get a breakdown of specifically what the activities are going to be. I know that the Revenue Commission has been working very closely with Chris Site to sort of break out what those responsibilities are going to be, but it's going to be in the realm of security, server maintenance, and that sort of thing.
So in the past, they were working with the entities that were collecting taxes, right? For us, also for JCPS and also for TARC, as well as the transit room tax.
They'll continue to do that.
They'll- in their new positions, they'll continue to do that?
At MTS. So that maintaining the Revenue Commission server is moving to MTS. It's no longer going to be a freestanding system within the Revenue Commission.
And how will the other agencies that are helping cover this cost, how will they fit into paying these costs going forward? There was a shared expense for collecting those revenues, and also they shared the expense.
Oh, you're talking about like JCPS and?
Yes,
Okay.
JCPS, the transient room tax, TARC, yes.
So we continue to, we have a collection fee agreement with those entities. We will continue to receive that collection fee. Those fees are sort of rolled into the general fund.
Okay,
So
so the
it'll-
movement here will not impact?
No.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you. I probably should have asked it more succinctly. Great. Are you back in, Councilman Chap, or did I just forget to? Okay. There was another Revenue Commission question, which I think we've answered. That's it for me. Any questions from any of my colleagues? Councilwoman Bast.
As far as the EMS runs, how does that work with the $6 million expense for EMS for the urban service district?
So per, state legislation, the suburban districts can now charge Metro for runs that they make into the USD. So we have, based on an estimate, we're not exactly sure, what that amount will be, but we believe 6 million is a reasonable estimate when we look at runs and what the rate is for what they can charge us. And we have placed that in OMB's budget. The invoices will come, we haven't worked out the specifics yet with the districts, but generally speaking, they're going to invoice us for their runs. That will be reviewed by EMS to ensure that those were runs into the USD, just make sure the billing is accurate, and then those bills will be paid out of the budget that we've placed it in OMB.
So why is it OMB exactly?
We will, because we are going to be the ones paying the invoices. I guess maybe I'm not following your question. Do you?
Yeah, I guess that's, why isn't it under emergency services, I guess, is more what I'm trying to get to.
Well, there are times, the arena payment bond is a good example where it's a large payment. Oftentimes OMB gets used as a place to sort of place these budgets for bigger picture expenditures. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to help.
No, I think I think you spoke to it.
Okay.
So it's used kind of as a catch-all? Is that what I'm understanding?
Not all the time, but there are certain expenditures. This is a new expense for one. This is brand new to us. We are estimating what the amount is going to be. we've placed it in OMB. It all comes from the same place. So we've placed it in OMB. We are going to be managing the payment of the invoices. EMS will be managing the review of the documentation that comes to us. And so this year, we've placed it in OMB's budget to be paid out of our budget. We have a general adjustments account that, just like we have a salary adjustments account, that's where we often will put funding for things like salary increases and things like that, rather than putting it out in the budget, out in the departmental budgets, we put it in OMB. And we treated this similarly.
So how is the 6 million funding to reimburse the suburban fire? How is that decided, and what does it look like for the next couple of years?
Well, again, it's an estimate. We have not paid any of that just yet. We are looking at run reports to decide, to determine what we think the run volume may be into the USD. When we've looked historically back, working with EMS to identify what we think that volume could be, and based that on the rates that were established in the KRS to sort of come up with an estimate of 6 million. We don't know if it will be more than that, it could be less than that, but this is our first year, so that's what we're starting with. Going forward, we'll base it on what the activity actually is. We'll true it up. So for FY '27, we'll probably have a much better idea of what that amount needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. I forgot to take out the system, I'm sorry. One last, just real quick then from me. We were looking at lease income from Park. At one point, the original budget was 350,000, revised to 350. In this budget, it's reduced to 0. And the explanation is that the decrease is due to realignment of budget to reflect credit to energy management system.
Yeah, so we were collecting that revenue as a revenue source, and I guess there was an accounting change, so now it's a credit to that particular spend category on the expense side. So instead of it being $2 million, it's now 1.7 as the expense.
Okay, so it nets out.
It nets out, that's right.
Instead of calling it revenue, you're just reducing expense.
That's right.
Okay, great. Any questions from colleagues? We are a few minutes over, but we can call it. Are we done? Good. Without objection, we're adjourned, and let's all send Councilman Winkler off to a happy birthday party. Let's get out of here.